fits here. They're gorgeous. Hang on, little bird. Hang on. There she goes. Hello and welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. The greenhouse is looking more clear. I still need to amend this row right here before I put anything in it. And then we need to deal with this side. We're gonna tackle some of this today. My little seedlings that I started for the fall and winter garden are looking really good. They still are kind of tender because they're still a little bit young. I forget exactly when I planted them, but I'd like to start getting these guys in the ground. I had been nervous about roly-polies or rodents eating down some of my seedlings, so I stuck some of the pea seedlings in the ground here. And these pea seedlings have been in the ground for a few days. It looks like nothing has touched them. I do have this cattle panel over here that I'm going to be erecting probably this weekend so that they can climb up it. And I do want to plant a couple more. So right now these pea seedlings are spaced about every like 10 inches apart. That is pretty far. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's kind of not a waste of space, but it's me not utilizing as much of the space as I could. So we will be popping in a few more pea seeds as well. There had been quite the roly-poly presence in our new bed here too, but these seedlings have all done really great. Over here we've got our rutabagas, and then of course some carrots. I noticed we had a few more germinating here in this kind of empty spot. Actually, the soil looks a little bit dry in here, so let's get this watered before we do anything else. The peas that I have here are the green arrow shelling peas. They are an heirloom variety. I've gotten them from a couple different seed suppliers, but more recently I've gotten them from Botanical Interests. And on the back of the seed packet it says we can plant them as close as 2 inches apart. I'm gonna go for like 4 inches apart, so I'm just gonna put a couple extra ones in between the already established seedlings over here. Now, in order to really ensure you have a decent amount of germination, with things like peas you can pre-soak the seed for overnight, the night before you want to plant them. That works well for things like black-eyed peas and other types of legumes. I'm not going to do that at this point. We're just going to stick them straight in the ground and this should do just fine. You can see how the pea row, I had pulled back the weed fabric. I did pull back the entire row and amend all of it, but I did roll it back here. This is where I plan to put some of these cauliflower plants, and I want to place them about every 2 feet. I have this tool called a dibber, and this is going to help me plant. So you can probably see from there, I have these little stems sticking up in the middle of each of these planting holes. These are just from the black-eyed peas that I grew earlier in the year. When I took out the black-eyed peas, I just cut them at their base and I left the roots in the ground. And the reason I did that was, number one, not to disturb the soil below, but also black-eyed peas and other legumes have little nodules on their roots that help distribute nitrogen back into the soil. And so by leaving those roots in the soil gets to benefit from that added nitrogen, and thus our plants get to benefit from that added nitrogen. So I'm going to take my dibber and I'm going to go right next to one of these old plant root things here. Place it down in, move it around a little bit, and then I've got a nice size hole that's perfect for one of these seedlings. So this is a cauliflower seedling right here. Shake it out right there. Normally, I will toss a little bit of rabbit manure down into the hole with my new seedling, but instead of doing it now, I actually did it already. You might be able to tell the color difference here. There's rabbit manure and compost at the bottom of all of these cups, so it's not really needed in the planting hole. All right, there's one. I have space for a few more in this row. I pray that the critters leave these alone. All right, so the center row on the west side is all planted now. That feels really good. And now I need to deal with this row here. So you can see that there's a couple very dead plants over here. These are actually some dragon tongue bush beans that I intentionally left like this because the seed that I have is from 2019. I actually bought quite a lot of seed, and the seed is still good. Like, it still germinates well for now, but it's not gonna hurt for me to keep back some seed from this year because these are just gonna have a better germination rate and they're gonna help replace some of that old seed. So it's actually ideal for me to leave the bean pods on the plant until they're nice and dry and crispy like this, but there's also quite a few that are large. I can feel that the seeds inside have developed quite nicely, and we're gonna open both of these up and see what they look like. All right, those seeds, beautiful. These are perfect. There's nothing wrong with them. Even though the outside has a little bit of mold growing, this is pretty normal, pretty common and standard with bean plants. But most of the time, the seed on the inside is unscathed, and this is perfectly savable. Now let's look at this one. It's a little bit more juicy. It's definitely past the point where you'd want to eat it. You definitely could. We've got some juicy seeds on the inside. Here's some of those juicy seeds, and these are very well developed. Very likely these, when they dry out, will save and germinate just fine. Do a side-by-side comparison. You can see these darker, smaller ones are the ones that are fully dry, and then these ones are pretty well hydrated. They're absolutely gonna wanna dry out before I try and store them. And what I can do is just lay these out on a cookie sheet and kind of toss them with my hand once or twice a day, and it should just take a few days before they're all nice and dry like that. So I need to go grab myself a basket. I am going to be popping off quite a few of these little bean pods here for the seed, and then I'm going to be taking out these plants as well as this trellis back here. Something I forgot to mention too, which is absolutely worth noting, if you have a lot of these larger bean pods that are really inedible as is, essentially of any variety, you can, you know, pop open the pod like we did before and take out the bean seeds, and you can cook these up and eat them just like you would any kind of, you know, black-eyed pea or pinto bean, black bean, anything like that. Totally doable. A couple of plants in the row that used to have our purple hull pink eye peas. These are the lima bean plants that I put in the ground this past March. They have had at least 2 successions of blooms and made lima beans, and they're on their 3rd. Now I've heard that lima beans are cold tolerant, but I don't think they're necessarily frost tolerant. That might not matter here in the greenhouse. As far as I can tell, in our 10-day forecast, we're not going to be experiencing a freeze, and even if we did, we could close down the sides and maybe keep these things going for quite a while longer. If we look down in here, you can see we've got fresh flowers down there. Obviously, tons of foliage. There's these other 2 lima bean plants down here. These ones have a lot of lima beans. That's so cool. Some of them have gotten little wormies on the inside, but most of them look really good. See them all? Holy moly. This one has both pods and flowers. So yeah, I think I want to try to leave those there as long as I can. They have not given up trying to make food. The beans that I have back here, these are our contender bush beans. They have really slowed down a whole lot. Although look, we are getting another succession of blooms going on these too. There's a few pickable beans on here. I would scour through those and pick them, but we're starting to lose light, and we haven't been in the raised bed garden yet today. You guys enjoying those refuse bean plants? Yummy? That banging you hear in the background, the military is doing a little bit of training. We live right behind a military training ground. So as always, raised bed garden is wild, lush, and beautiful. I noticed these the other day. I came to harvest a head of lettuce to go with dinner. This is elephant garlic. I knew that there was at least one head of elephant garlic that I left in the ground. And then I had countless little corms just fall off the bottom of the heads of garlic. And those are like essentially little starter garlics. They're really tiny. They're not probably good to eat. They're pretty hard, but they fall off really easily. So I just knew we were gonna have more elephant garlic, which I'm not mad about. Last week we saw some of our pak choi was going to seed. We still have more of it doing that. I harvested some of it, and I may have harvested a little bit too low in order to do like a cut and come again harvesting. This one here seems to be coming back. Can you see these little green bits here? So I'll show you back here on this plant what I did. You probably will have a cleaner cut, obviously, if you did this with a knife, but I very rarely come to the garden prepared. So I just grabbed the whole bunch with my hands like this and braced the bottom of the plant and just kind of twisted the greens. Twisted the greens off like that. See, I've got my bunch of greens here, which these have not tasted bitter, even though they've started to flower, which I'm really grateful for. And see, we've left the rest of the plant in the ground, and it should come back like this one is. This is the first time I've ever done any kind of cut and come again harvesting with my pak choi. I've done it a lot with my lettuces. Actually, I've been wondering if this lettuce bed here is going to appear to have changed at all, because I keep coming and harvesting, and so it's staying pretty much the same density, the same height. But we have collected 2 pretty big salads out of this space since our last garden tour. That's a big helicopter. In our radish bed, I'm happy to announce that it looks like none of these plants got scalded from me harvesting the radishes last week. I'm pretty sure quite a few of these plants that are getting bigger here are broccoli, so that's pretty exciting. Now what I did to plant this bed was I literally just took seed packets and threw the seed in the ground and watered them in. And because of that, some of these plants, in order to get to full size, I am gonna have to thin them out. So I'm just gonna make some calls here right now, because some of these plants are trying to get bigger and I don't want to stunt them. A lot of these are broccoli, some of them are probably cabbage, and they're gonna need about 18 inches spacing, so quite a few of these have to come out. That's okay. This is all bonus food. I really wasn't sure what this bed was gonna do. Someone had asked if I ever feed any of our excess plants like this to our rabbits. I give a lot to the chickens, and I have been giving some to the goats. The reason that I don't give a lot to the rabbits, especially of this type of thing, these are brassicas, and they tend to make rabbits kind of gassy. You can give them these things, but you have to go really slow. Our rabbits do get greens as treats, but usually it's just nettles and things from the area that's closer to where their hutches are. So you can give these types of things to rabbits. You just have to be careful and watch them. So I'm starting to clear out around this particular plant. To me, the leaf of this plant makes me think that it's a cabbage. I really like the unknown surprise nature of this particular bed right now. All right, I've cleaned up quite a lot around certain plants that looked like they were bigger and a little bit more established. I think this one and this one, those are cabbages. This looks like a broccoli to me, and that one might be a red cabbage. I can't remember what seeds I scattered in there, so it's a surprise, but that should give them enough room to grow. These are little, but we've got a secondary crop of Black Beauty tomatoes. See that one there? And then these look like the rainbow tomatoes. These are really small. At this point in the season, the nutrition down here is pretty much done. This one here. This is a Belgian giant. Not so giant. Oh, see? Nope. We'll just give that back to the bed. That one looks all right. Yes?
Pepper was walking out into the field and every single baby was following her.
They were. Okay, we'll have to make sure that the babies make it back in the barn tonight.
Yeah, they were all following her.
Oh, how cute.
All of them.
Well, good. Let's see if any of these peppers have ripened. Look at how far down the soil has sunk down in this bed. That is a good 10 inches. When we first filled these beds with soil, we did a hugelkultur type of filling method. It's really cost saving. We had a tree fall down by our pond, and so we cut it up into bits and loaded. There's a honeybee down here. Hi, darling. Did you see her? We layered logs first, and then sticks and leaves, and then compost on top, and then I believe topsoil on top of that, and that was in 2020, and this is as far down as I have seen it sink. I'm guessing those logs by now are really starting to break down. That's not a problem. I've got plenty of compost in my barn, and we'll fill these right up, but not until these peppers come out. And as long as we don't have any freezes in the near future, which it doesn't really look like it, I'll be leaving the peppers on. Unfortunately, the peppers are doing the thing that the tomatoes are doing. They're just starting to get a little bit blighty, so some of them have these spots. I just throw the fruit right back down into the bed. It's just gonna feed the soil, and it's not a total loss. This plant right here is called the yellow monstrose or yellow monster pepper. I haven't had too many of them get super big. They are, earlier in the season they were bigger than this, but that's the color. Okay. That is super yucky. Let's get that out of here. Remember how I told you guys last week that we got like the lightest frost ever? It didn't actually kill the plants, but this is something I noticed, is that some of the fruits that got like the tiniest touch of frost, they are starting to get weird. I don't know that this is blight necessarily. It could be, but I started noticing more spots after we had that very brief cool dip. Look in here. Look at that big one. Beauty. There's a lot of big ones in here. They're gorgeous. I'd like to leave them on because I'd like to see more of that yellow color. This variegated pepper plant got completely buried by this Sugar Rush peach pepper back here. I have no idea if there's any peppers on this plant. It's such a pretty plant. Oh yeah, there are. See here? Candy cane sweet pepper. Beautiful. I am actually out of seeds for this, but because it's planted so close to a hot pepper, I'm not going to be saving any of these back for seed. Peppers do like to cross-pollinate quite readily, especially when they're planted this close, so I'm just going to have to buy more seed. But see, even the fruit is variegated. It's just loads and loads of Sugar Rush peach. It's time to make more hot sauce, clearly. I've got another series of pepper plants over here in front of our cherry tomatoes, and these guys are really heavy with fruit. It might be a little bit hard to see because they're all green right now. This particular plant ripens to a really pretty orange, and I'd like to see that color, so we'll leave them on, even though we could absolutely pick them green. They would be super delicious. Pepper plants, they'll put on an initial flush of blooms and you'll get fruit. And then the next flush of blooms, you'll get even more fruit. And then if your season is long enough and you get a third flush of blooms, like we've got right here, you'll have even more fruit. It's like it exponentially increases as the season continues. And in some places where it's warm enough, you can actually overwinter peppers and get a jump on next season. I've tried that here. I have brought pepper plants inside the house, and I actually did have some fruit inside the house. I think that was maybe in 2021. But honestly, it's not necessarily worth the effort for me. We live in a really small house and it's not worth the space. I haven't tried to overwinter them in the garden before, but I have a sneaking suspicion that that wouldn't work super well here, especially in a raised bed. A raised bed is technically a container, and because it's up on top of the ground, the plant isn't as well insulated, or its roots are not as well insulated as they would be if they were planted in the ground. It's something that I might try in a future year, possibly in the greenhouse would be a good spot to overwinter peppers, but it's not happening this year. I see something that matches my shorts. See? This one is beautiful. This is another Belgian giant. This here is something we haven't gotten a taste of pretty much all season. I've had a few ground cherries here and there, but they've all either volunteered or were planted around our arch trellis here, which has birdhouse gourd on it and loofah gourd, and both of these plants and this blackberry over here have a lot of foliage that really took over, and our ground cherries didn't get enough sunlight. But now that these plants are starting to die back, the ground cherries are getting a little bit more light. They are looking sickly and they are dying off, but there's quite a few little ground cherries down here. See, this is the plant. It's looking pretty sick, but down around it you can see the little fruits that have fallen. It's what they're known for. It's why they're called ground cherries. Because of the way they fruit, their ripe fruit falls off, it's really easy to lose a few here and there. And of course, critters carry them off. And because of that, we actually haven't had to plant ground cherries in a few years, because every single year, no matter how many amendments I add on top of these beds, somehow they find their way to the surface, and we haven't been without ground cherries, even though I haven't planted them in a while. I usually can't collect enough of them to make anything. Like, I've never made a pie or a jam or anything out of the ground cherries. It's kind of like the cucamelons, although I do usually harvest more cucamelons than I do ground cherries. But they kind of just act like a little snack, a little bonus for stepping foot in the garden. Well guys, hubby is pulling up. It is time to make dinner. I am gonna cut one of these lettuce heads right off at the base. I'm gonna try to leave a little bit, just like I did with the pak choi, and maybe we'll get even more lettuce out of that one particular plant.